Okay, just checking the recording. We are. Okay, so welcome. So we're looking at this. So this is part of a bigger series, it doesn't say this. So I'm kind of doing a series of teaching on various things. And it's not like it's really going to be very organised and regimented. I'm just kind of throwing out there and you can do whatever you want with it. But it is kind of one-to-one, just watch, listen, understand, then take that, go and have a look at it, or not. It's up to you. Take it, go and discuss it with someone, or not. It's up to you. Edit it. Just don't ascribe myself as the author if you're doing that. Yes, because I'm not to blame. I'm to blame for this. These are my ideas. So that series is called The Big Lie. So it's basically three things. So I think in the 18 months since lockdown, I'm kind of looking time and time again, understanding three things. One is culturally, our culture and the world around us is falling apart because of lies about what we consider facts or truth, and that's presented as, I would say, I mean, it's a discussion. We're not having this discussion now. It all goes into the discussion. That's the point. Misrepresentation, but it's deliberate misrepresentation mostly. Not all, obviously. This is the lies in the world that the world's propagating, and then it's the truth of the church. So when you look at the truth of the church, you're saying, well, let's dive into that truth. So we're doing those two things. We're looking at lies and we're seeing something, we're getting a revelation, and then we're looking at truth and having a revelation. And then it's kind of a handshake. So you've got the left hand, which is positive or negative, and you've got the right hand that's the opposite. So the negative, what's in the world, the positive, what's happening in the church. Okay, it's a handshake. The two interact. So that's kind of the point of the series. Okay, so I think the third point is, I think in this season we'd be given time to actually look at this and to dive deeper to have these discussions. But I don't see these discussions taking place. I see the church in lockdown as locking itself down instead of opening itself up. And the conversation is always the same. It's not about what we can do, it's about what we can't. My point is, what should we be doing is what we can do and not worrying about the fact we can't do what we can't do and worry about it. It will either get back to normal or it won't. And then I think my final point is nothing's going back to normal. This is a new season, it's a new world, everything's changed. Okay, so that's the point of the big lie. Because I think, to me, it is a big lie. Anyway, so this is the first. So obviously it's the first teaching. It's pretty important in my mind. So the church's primary identity, or biblical bridal theology, if you want to give it a fancy term, same thing. But this idea of us, the church, or ecclesia, as a bride, is important. Not just important, but actually it's the most important. So controversy. So the point is, no, we're not having a discussion on that. So if you think this is going to be like blah 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 blah, I say this, you say that. No, we're just simply going to find it. Where is it? Let's find it, and find it in the Bible, because we've got the word theology there and biblical, and that's important. So this is a highly controversial topic. So why talk about it? So I've kind of had my own interests, and since I was like 19, sort of, for reasons I won't go into, I'm not going to go into my story because I don't want to bore you, for one, and this isn't about me, but I kind of had an awareness, there was a deeper revelation which slowly dawned on me since I was 19, but particularly speeded up in 2007, 8, and 9, and I got to the point, I need to look at this. So this is the point, talking about controversy. If you ask a random bunch of Christians, is it either important or the most important? No one's going to say yes. No one's going to say it's anywhere near yes. To me, to me, as I on this slides, as I talk about them, and I talk about this, there's a controversy in that. So whenever there's controversy in church history, it always gets discussed. But this is a controversy; it never gets discussed, never gets talked about. The best way to shut someone down is just to tell them that you believe that the primary identity of the church is the bride of Christ. I don't really understand why that is so, but that's not even the key issue in understanding the controversy. The key issue is, what if we had this wrong? So, because it basically bleeds, literally it bleeds, and it leads into other stuff. So ideas about, if we don't think we're a bride, then how can we be a church? If we don't think we're a bride in a church, how can we build the kingdom of God? And the idea is Jesus is coming back for a perfected bride. Okay, so we can't, if we're supposed to be a bride, then and we don't think we're a bride, and we don't talk about being a bride, and we don't actively then act that out, then we can't build the kingdom of God. That holds true for everything, certainly to a certain extent. But if we are the bride of Christ, and that's our primary identity, which is what we're discussing. So the other eschatological problem is this: if Jesus is coming back for a perfected bride, and this is another angle of the same argument, he's not coming back until we are a perfected bride. So the kingdom has to be in a certain state on the earth. Jesus comes back for that perfected bride, but we will be perfected. So at some point we have to understand this from where we are at the moment, where we've always been as a church, to where the church is in the end times. And let's not discuss when that is, because that's not a matter for discussion or context within this talk. It's just the point that we've got to go on this journey. So when we're going to start it, I would suggest sooner rather than later, just for our own benefit. Not just because we don't know when. But that's not the real problem. That's just the problem of the controversy. So the problem is you have one picture. Yeah? Bridal identity and the church have one picture. Which is bride means this. So basically, search bride in Google, click on images, bang. So this is the problem. And this is what we need to understand primarily. And if we don't understand it, we will understand it by the end of this. So this idea, we've basically got to, borrow in a phrase from Cobra Kai, flip the switch. So when we talk about bride, this is the image in our heads. Okay? But is it the right image? So it's totally absurd if you're a guy, and if you're a woman, generally opposite, because you just can't identify with that. And this is the discussion within the whole issue. We're not negating that. To say as a male I'm a bride doesn't mean I'm going to be walking down the aisle to marry Jesus in a white dress. Yeah? So that's not the problem. So the women somewhat get their own back because they have a female model of a female image of identity, whereas all the others are male. But this isn't the real problem, which is, wait for it, it's obvious. Think, you might want to pause. So if this is a video, you can pause it. You can pause at any point and just think about what I said. That would be, I would think, healthy. You don't have to do it. So if we consider an ancient Hebrew wedding of Jesus' day, then would we expect to see the bride in white? No. This is not the tradition. So it's not even in the Bible. It's not a biblical tradition. It's not a tradition of Jews. So that's the point. This is not the tradition. I'm not going to shout or labeling. But the point to labeling is, then, if the white woman in the white dress is not the tradition, what is? Because we need to understand what that is before we can answer the question. So we really do need to flip the switch. So what is that? We don't know. How much do we then understand about the Bridal Paradigm? And if we don't understand anything, do we know anything? And the answer is no. So actually, we're basing our assumptions on completely the opposite thing. So the point really is, despite the last 10 minutes, what does she actually look like, a bride in Jesus' day in a Jewish wedding? That's our model. That's our understanding of being a bride. That's our understanding of kingdom. That's our understanding of church, if what I'm saying is true. So flip the switch. So same method, Google, not particularly accurate. So this is a tradition. This is what we have to base that discussion on. And clearly, she's not in white. So Google Images, again, not the most reliable. So you have a couple of white dressed ladies clearly getting married, but majority not. So even Googling its inaccuracy has worked out. The idea in our head about the bride isn't the idea that we should base that idea of, certainly biblically or theologically, again, because the point, this isn't the bride of Jesus' day. So this is the tradition. So when that's the flip switch, this is the tradition, not the white. So there's nothing to label on that, but you can see they all look pretty happy. They're all dressed up. They all look like they're going to a party. So maybe when we flip the switch, we should think this is more party mode than official wedding mode, which has taken out the wedding bit. But then, even from this, we can see that's somewhat correct in terms of what a wedding would be. It's not tradition, it's a traditional party. It's a little bit different. When we flip the switch, we get something else. So what is that tradition then? And that's really what we're going to look at. We're going to look at that tradition and where it is in the Bible. And it'll be New Testament teaching, not Old, in case we're wondering. So the ancient Hebrew wedding is it's a drawn out affair compared to our weddings. It has 7 detailed elements. In terms of its longevity, it takes years to go through them. Generally speaking, lots and lots and lots of years. The biblical example we have, of the biblical examples, well, it's mentioned much, but it's 7 years. So your wedding ceremony takes 7 years. Would have been years generally, and wanted to do a quick Hebrew wedding on the side. You can't run off to Gretna Green, would have taken about a year. So from our perspective, that tradition is very weird, but it's also wonderful. And the picture we get, which we then have the discussion about what is the bride of Christ, is wonderful. So this is what we'll find out. It's a revelation from the Father who Jesus is, what he came back to do, and why he's coming back. Once understood, it's impossible to disconnect Christology from ecclesiology. That's just fancy words. Ology means study. So if we want to get formal and doctrinal about it, we use fancy words. We don't have to. So the study of Christ and the study of ecclesia, which is the Greek word that Jesus uses in the Greek in the New Testament when he talks about the church for the first time. So we'll go into finer detail, but first we just want to pull out these key stages in the New Testament. So first up, the parable of the 10 virgins. It shouldn't surprise us this is included, but what we actually will find, it will shock us. It's like, we'll do this, but boom, something should go off in you and go, wow, didn't know that. So this is it, parable of the 10 virgins. So what part of that is not relevant to the 7th stage? So we're asking which bits of that passage are relevant, and if we flip the switch on that, which are not. So if we look at the bits that aren't relevant, we don't take out any of it. So this is the boom. It fully describes the 7th stage in its entirety. There is nothing in there Jesus is taking away. There's nothing in there he's adding. It entirely describes the 7th stage of a wedding. And even people who get basically what Matthew 25 are saying about the bridegroom, the friends of the bridegroom, don't even get this point, that it fully describes that 7th stage. So in the longevity and the detail of what we're discussing, it fully describes that stage, but just, so it's the 7th of it. So we're beginning to actually flip the switch now, to see the picture. So this is the detail of that. So again, I can go back. Oh, you can read it for yourself, but if you want to read it, most of us are familiar with what it says, not what it means. So this is what it was actual meaning, and this is the detail. So that this is why it's alien. So the actual wedding day is not planned like our weddings. That statement, actual wedding day, is incorrect because it's over 7 stages. But that last 7th stage is not planned. So no one actually knows when the wedding will take place, not even the bride and the groom. This is the bizarreness of the whole ceremony, and particularly this 7th stage. That is, it's the father. So the father is the one who knows when it takes place, and is the one who says it takes place. So this is what Jesus is describing. When a father announces the wedding is going to take place, he sends out forerunners, so they carry the message that the wedding is about to begin. So we can see already in what Jesus is saying, what we think he's talking about, he's not talking about. He actually is, but he isn't at the same time. That's a Jewish thing, by the way. If you don't understand what I'm saying, don't worry. So they're called the friends of the bridegroom, so they're part of that party. So they're a part of the bridegroom's party. They're his friends, they're his relations, and his close friendships. So the father announces, it's announced to them, they go and announce it to everyone else. So what's that a picture of? Well, we know what it's a picture of, but we don't understand it's a picture of a Jewish wedding. So what is taking place scripturally is the image and the pattern we see in the Jewish wedding. So they announce the guests to gather because the groom is coming. So it's coming in the sense of theologically, because it's talking about Jesus wedding. It's talking about Jesus as the groom. So Jesus is coming back to await his bride. So he's awaiting his bride. So this generally plays in the middle of the night when it's dark. Hence the imagery of virgins. So that's a maiden. That's basically someone who is a virgin, pure, chastised. Sorry for the spelling mistake there. But it's dark. So that's what the imagery of these pure people needing oil and lamps because it's dark. So we understand the concept of light in the Bible. We don't really need to discuss that. So as an event, this, spelled wrongly, part is, so there's a fanfare, so it's a party, it's a celebration, because what's gone before in terms of the previous 6 stages which we haven't yet covered, is the whole thing is ending. It's the fulfillment of everything. Alludes to something, doesn't it? So it's fanfare, it's possession with a lot of noise. So the bride expects from weather. So again, she doesn't know she's going to get married. She just wants to be married, and she wants her groom to come and find her, collect her, and take her to where they're going to get married. So there's lots of noise, and again, we don't want to labour, but I think we need to labour somewhat. The groom doesn't even know what he's about to do. Imagery again. So there's lots of noise, so shofars are blown. So there's lots of examples of shofars being blown. So call a sacred assembly, blow the trumpet. Zion, Joel 1:14 and 2:1. So there's lots of noise. The party, they make their way to the party. There's the blowing of the shofar. That's in critical points and done at critical times. Done here for this wedding stage. So this language, this is the point I mentioned in Joel. The language is there in the Bible. You just don't see it as what it actually is. Yes, it's other ceremonies, but it includes this. And it all packages up. And we know when the final shofar will be blown, so to speak. So Luke 14:8 begins with this. And this is kind of labouring on the point on the wedding language that Jesus uses. So, when thou art bidden of any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room, lest a more humble man and thou be bidden of him. That's old school KGB. Now, in this story, Jesus says, stop there. So, we need to discuss the point. Jesus is talking about weddings. Which kind of weddings is he talking about? This wedding. Okay? So, the whole of Luke 14:8, I guess we're not familiar with it in this concept of understanding the ceremony. So when thou art bidden to any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room, lest a more honourable man than thou be bidden of him. And he bade that thee and him come and say to thee, give this man, and thou begin with shame to take the lowest room. When thou art bidden, so what does Jesus mean by bidden? So it's the same thing. No one knows the day or the hour when the ceremony will take place. Suddenly it's just announced it's going to take place, but you don't get an invitation in the post. It's taking place now. And then it continues, and then Jesus is labouring the point of like humility, basically, but in the context of the wedding, of where you sit. Verse 12 we'll skip to. Then he said also to him that bade him, when thou make a dinner or supper, call not thy friends, nor thy brethren, neither the kinsmen, nor thy rich neighbours. They also bid thee again, and the recompense be made thee. So like everyone, the point here we're labouring on, everyone's bidden, and this is what bidden means. But when thou makest a feast, call the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind. So Jesus is really labouring on the point of who is called to the wedding. And thou shalt be blessed, for they cannot recompense thee, for thou shalt be recompensed at the resurrection of the just. So Jesus is then talking about the same thing. He's using the wedding analogy because it fits exactly, if we understand it, with the actual ceremony. And then, blessed is he who thou shalt eat bread in the kingdom of God. So Jesus is alluding to something. When we eat bread in the kingdom of God, what are we actually doing? We're partaking of a future wedding ceremony, and we'll look at that in a bit. But the whole point of Luke 14 is that this is like really rich with who we are and what's going to happen, but we don't understand it because we don't understand the 7 stages. Then make a great supper, and then the servant gets sent and bidden, come, for all things are now ready. They all go with one consent, begin to make excuse. So I don't think I've read that properly. So basically they're all making excuses about why they can't. So there's this interchange. So firstly it's based on the wedding, and then Jesus is actually explaining from the wedding, his wedding. So the point is Jesus isn't talking about a wedding, he's not talking about the church being a bride theologically. Theologically he's saying, I am the groom. He's stating who he is. And it's from who he states who he is that we understand who we are. So I think it's entirely unique to biblical teaching to be taught this way, and it can only be taught by Jesus. Jesus can only express who he is, but he's expressing who we are through who he is. And again, he's not to labour on the point, but it needs labouring. He's using the wedding terminology, and he's injecting into that who he is, but he's talking more generally about his wedding, which comes from a wedding. And then obviously the point again to labour on, what are those 7 stages? So this is the rest of it. So once we understand that, basically we can pick up a lot of things. So he's talking about 4 things generally within the idea of the celebration of a wedding. So the issues we see, those are separate, sort of connected in this idea of a wedding celebration. So again, Jesus isn't talking about a wedding, he's talking about his wedding. So Paul coined it this way. This is what Paul means by this. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the 2 shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. So however, let each one of you love his wife, and he gets on about that. So the point is, Paul's just repeating Jesus. So Jesus is talking about a wedding, and what he's talking about, he's not talking. Jesus is almost like saying, he's explaining to us about explaining. I'm not talking about a wedding, I'm talking about my wedding. So this is the mystery, profound. When we talk about a wedding in the Bible, we're not talking about a wedding, we're talking about Jesus' wedding. That is the profound mystery. So again, that's something we need to switch. So then we could go back to talking about how a man should treat his wife, how a woman should treat her husband, how they're married, how they live as one. It's a reflection, basically, to put it bluntly, but it's simply but bluntly, God created marriage for theological purposes. So when we get married and we experience marriage, we begin to understand the bridal paradigm, and the two interact. So just to label on the mystery point, I don't need to, but I could do, so I am. So mystery means secret in Hebrew. It doesn't mean what we would think of mystery, that we don't understand it. In Hebrew, you don't understand it because it's secret, and it's secret because it's held back from you. So Mystery Babylon, for example, that's probably the best place to look at mystery from a New Testament perspective. So the Hebrew word for Babylon comes from the root word Babel, if you didn't know. So it's a Bet Lamed. I do know one or two things about Hebrew. So it's the BB, not all letters in Hebrew refer to, or not all sounds of letters refer to one letter. So that Aleph and Ayin can be an A. The Kof and the Kaf can be a K sound. That's all. So BBL or Bet Lamed. Bet Lamed is in both. And actually Babylon, you've got Bet Lamed, and then you've got Yod, and you've got Nun, which in Hebrew is a suffix meaning many. So many Babels. So it means confusion. So really, mystery means confusion. It means something being secret, not because it's valuable, but because it's confusing. So where does that term come from? Because in the Tower of Babel, which is where it all comes from, in the Bible, God confuses sons of men, so there's confusion. So literally what John's saying when he talks about mystery Babylon, the confusion about confusing Babylon is she's confusing. Or the mystery is she's a mystery. It's not actually mystifying at all. So point one, this is getting back to the point that Jesus is making in Luke 14. It's a revelation. The revelation is when Jesus is talking about marriage, he's talking about his marriage. That marriage is marriage. It's that word again. So the marriage is the supper of the Lamb. That's the revelation of the mystery. And it's not a mystery. It's just a revelation of the revelation, which is revelation. So if you need to pause on that. So the mystery of the mystery Babylon is that she's a mystery. That she's supposed to confuse men. We're supposed to be confused, but actually it's not confusing. We understand and we don't be confused. It's simple. So point two is invites are sent out. They don't get invited through the post. Literally then they also don't know the day, the hour that the wedding they're going to takes place. They hear the shofars and noise, see the lights and the lamps, which are burning by oil, knock on the door. So you understand the context with the parable of the 10 virgins. What we culturally miss is, as Jesus is saying that, they don't know exactly what he's talking about, so it doesn't need to describe it. So everyone he's talking to understands what a Jewish wedding looks like. So that's a difference. So we talk about what it means then and what it means now. Well, the difference from what it means then to the people he's saying and now is like, he doesn't need to explain it. The imagery is simple because everyone's been to a wedding. So same for the reader. So Luke writes for the same reasons. But we miss that point. So for us, it needs to be added that it's a wedding. Obviously, that people, what Jesus is saying back then and what Luke is retelling, they wouldn't have needed that. So they didn't add it in, which is why it's not in the Bible. So the highways and byways is the knocking on the door, inviting to the wedding. So Jesus adds in the ceremony, he points out, and it's not just in the 10 virgins, it's across every time he's talking about the same subject, that those who will be invited will reject. So note, the Father isn't inviting them to be part of the church via salvation. So this is the point for us as church, that all the 10 virgins are part of the church, but yet they still get locked out of the wedding. That's pretty serious. So what does Jesus mean? Well, we're not going to discuss that, what he actually theologically means, or what does the Bible say. But it's something we need to consider for ourselves. So what's he inviting them to be? They're not being invited by salvation to be part of the church via the whole 7-step wedding process, to take place in his theological wedding, so to speak, which isn't a Western wedding. You're not a bride walking down an aisle. So the point of buying oil being refined in the fire, we kind of understand that because we understand what oil and fire represent and lamps represent. So light is then one of the 3 ways you know the wedding is actually taking place. So lesson 1, if you don't have, we're talking about the foolish virgins, if you don't have oil for your lamp, then you can't be a messenger or a friend of the bridegroom, because you effectively have no lamp. So you have a lamp but it's not got oil, so it's not a lie. So lesson 2 is, in that season all people will be asleep. So we talk about this a lot, who is awake and is asleep. Everyone's asleep at the end times. I think that's a revelation we need to, again, really suck up and flip the switch on again. So the biblical teaching about seasons is actually repetitive. It's like, even if it's specifically about a specific season, it's still talking generally about all seasons. So the current revelation we're in, you can clearly see the whole world is asleep. So when we talk more and more about lies, that's one of the reasons we're all asleep. So the message is we're going to go back to the way things were by building back better. That's the message to the world. So in reality, there's no going back. So we're kind of talking now more about the season we're in. But the revelation, when we read that we should grasp and bring in today is, we're all asleep. Have we, this is our personal, this is the personal question for you and for me and for everyone. And only we can answer that question for ourselves. No one can ask it for us, and actually no one should judge us or ask it on our behalf. It's not their right. So how much oil do we have for our lamps? Considering we're asleep and we're waiting for what we're waiting for. So this is the point of the big lie. So the way we're heading is destruction. We would just want to go back to the way things were, which is brokenness, basically. And the way we were going is broken, which is why we're here in the first place. It just isn't about a pandemic. Pandemic's just the tipping point. So instead there is a new way forward, which involves not going back, but involves naturally moving forward. So we can be overly critical. This is part of the point, labouring on. We can be overly critical because we say, I am critical of you because you have fallen asleep. So labour the point, we've all fallen asleep. So we need to understand that. So the point is being a friend of the bridegroom. It's how we don't fall asleep, and we don't find ourselves asleep in certain situations, including this season, the final season that Jesus is talking about specifically here, or any season. It's to be intimate with Jesus, so we're let in on the things of the kingdom, including the announcement of Jesus coming back. So the whole point is to have oil, and there's no other point. So the point isn't really about who you are, who you're related to, and if you're asleep or not. All those are important. The point is, actually, none of those things matter unless you have oil. So we could labour teaching about what oil represents, but simply, which we're not, simply light, illumination. God says at the beginning, let there be light. You study the Hebrew word, it means illumination. So we're in the know because we've had illumination from God. So specifically Revelation 3:18, advise you to buy from me refined in the fire. So it's not using the exact words, but the imagery is the same, about having oil and bought. You're not given oil, you buy oil, it costs you something. We're now living in a world where no one's prepared to pay the price to get to the final destination or to get something. We just want it given to us. We're not prepared to buy it. The point of where we're going is we're buying it. We're finding it in the fire, which is painful to some degrees. Whether it's really painful or not, doesn't matter. It's going to cost us something. So that's the other point. So what we're saying about the foolish virgins is they're pure, they're just not holy. That's not a contradiction. So holy means set apart. So how are you set apart? You're pursuing Jesus and you're pursuing who Jesus is. You don't even necessarily have to be pursuing it in the bridegroom. I mean, that's the ultimate irony. It's okay, it may well be the most important thing, but you don't have to be the most important thing for you. You just pursue Jesus in the right context. It just so happens that biblically the right context happens to be the bridegroom and the bride. But you don't have to understand it all. You just have to go out and get oil. So whether you get oil and you understand it in one concept or another is not the point. The point is to get oil, to buy oil. So the point Jesus is labouring on in the wedding, some stages, they can't actually see where they're going. They don't have oil. So it's the middle of the night, which we've kind of gone a long way past in discussing. But let's go back to that. The procession for the seventh stage of the wedding is noisy, it's loud, it's party, it's fun, it's busy, it's what you could picture it to be. But if you don't have oil in your lamp, you've got nothing to light your way inside that procession, which is to the wedding. So I hope the pennies dropped on that. So what you have to do, you have to go and get it all from someone else because you've not bought it previously. So by the time you've gone to do that, you've gone to get it from practically the oil distributor. It's actually too late. And it's too late because you've lost the noise and the light of the procession because they're in the dark. So what Jesus is practically saying is, right, if you're a foolish virgin, you go and buy oil, and by the time you've got that oil, you can light your way with the wedding procession, but you've lost the wedding procession, you're effectively in the dark. So let me just repeat that without labouring on it, what that would mean. But if you're a foolish virgin, you haven't bought oil, by the time the timing comes for the event that you're looking to, you're effectively in the dark. So this is critically the point that I was questioning before I understood it in this concept. So if you're going, oh, why didn't I know this? Well, I didn't, so no shame. But who shuts them out? So critically, they shut themselves out. No one does it to them. So we had this whole idea about the judgment of God. Why is God judging them by shutting them out of the wedding? They're not shut out of the wedding. They're invited just because of how they behave and what they do. They shut themselves out. So this is the problem with what the world is falling apart, how the world is being judged. And you can see it everywhere. That actually, what's being judged is because of who we are and what we've done. God's not critically judging anyone. So critically, we're judging ourselves more than anyone else judging us. And this is critically why culture is being eroded. So this idea is talked about. It's begun to be talked about by what we would presume to be right-wing politicians, extreme. And it's not really been talked about and not really discussed because it's just something taken for granted, and now it's not taken for granted. So what's being eroded is what it's Christian values, and politically it's called Judeo-Christian. So we get them from the traditions of Judaism and Christianity in the Bible. And they're replaced with what? So this is why we talked about Babylon, what Babylon is. With Babylon, and why. So this is part of the big lie. There's people that buy oil, and there's people that haven't bought oil. Yeah? So the people that haven't bought oil, they're striving in the dark with no oil for the lamp because they haven't bought it. And remember, in Revelation, Jesus is saying, we get that from him. So this is kind of the critical thing. So if you don't agree with this and don't understand it, that's not a problem. So if we go one step beyond what we're talking about, but the point of this is we can't understand what I'm talking about unless we understand this bridal paradigm and these 7 stages. So to me, the green agenda, even Black Lives Matter, can't fix the world. That doesn't mean they're not important. They just won't fix this broken world. And they are man's way of groping in the dark. So we look at wider what we assume to be the better things happening in the planet. So I think the top 3 most people would list is the green agenda, climate change, Black Lives Matter, and Me Too movement. And are they right? Yes, they are all right. To a degree, actually, they don't really understand how right they are. But this is the point. It's still going out in the world with your lamp without the oil. Because the oil, even the oil of justice and righteousness, in any sense, can only be bought from God. I mean, that's critically what we believe. So my point is, if no matter how great these organisations are, and to the extent that our focus becomes on what they are doing and what they are saying, and then our lives get tainted by them, actually the point is the world less racist and misogynistic? So there's 2 points. So the 1 point would be actually, do they make it worse? We're not going to labour on that. And the second point would be, it's certainly not better, it's worse. And it's worse despite what they're doing and saying, because they are not buying oil from where you buy oil. Only we can buy oil from where we can buy oil. And if I want to stress a point of the value and the identity and the power of the church, it's in this. Only we can solve the problem on the earth. And only seeking Jesus can solve those problems. So the point isn't all this stuff. The point is what we can talk about how much oil is in your lamp. Okay, and this is what Jesus is teaching in the context of wedding, in the context of his wedding. So actually, this stuff we're talking about goes really, really deep, and it's fundamental. So that's discussing that. So the wedding is arranged. We haven't discussed that yet. We will discuss it in future. Just drop your negative connotations, because it's not going to be what you think it is if it's negative. So it's 2-stage. So biblically, Messiah comes back again. So he initiates the marriage, and then he consummates the marriage. And again, we see that in all the 7 stages. The marriage is arranged, initiated. There's a contract drawn out. It's contracted. It's legal. And then blah, blah, blah happens, which we'll look into, and then it's consummated in the 2nd stage. So the 7th stage is actually, 7th stage fulfills the 2nd stage. So it's a direct parallelism, or however you want to talk about it, metaphorical, whatever. It's big word or small. It's just a picture of Jesus' wedding, or his coming back again bit. So the 7th stage is this. There's this procession and there's a ceremony where they consecrate marriage. We do the same thing in a different way. Some of it overlaps, some of it doesn't. It means a different thing. It's a celebration. It's a proof of virginity, which is a weird concept. But that's the 7th stage. So we'll go into what that actually means later on. So I think you've now realised this isn't going to be an hour. So 2nd or 3rd stage, we'll talk about that. That is one of the stages, the proof of virginity. Again, weird but wonderful in the picture of what we're discussing. So there are gaps to what we need, but only because we haven't covered the other 6 stages. So if you're like a bit dazed, confused, and a bit like, well, shouldn't understand it because you've only got one part of the jigsaw puzzle rather than all 7. So the 7th stage, or the second coming, is the part of the wedding. So to us, that is just an eschatological parable. For those in Jesus, they would instantly recognized it for what it is, that Jesus is doing this for what it is, sorry. So they would have instantly recognized it for what it is, a wedding. Jesus is describing a wedding. So to us, that Jesus is doing this in teaching is curious. It's an idea we need to unwrap and flip the switch. So if you dig into that, this is the key to understanding both our role as Christians and our Jewish brides. It's one and the same thing. So it's all about preparing ourselves for Jesus. So preparation, which you either don't know or you will find out, is the key thing to what we're talking about in the Jewish wedding. So as we uncover that, we'll realise it's all about preparation. And this is supposed to be one part, but I'm going to have to split it into. So this is part 1 of part 1. So follow on to the next video for part 2 of part 1, and we'll continue with the others. We're going to go through actually 4 of the 7 stages. So this is the first one we've gone through.